Ivy Valentine subscribes to Mark Yoon, so should you. Enjoy your treat!
Alright, so one of the biggest questions that I get in my comment section a lot, or on Discord, or even a lot of things that like trolls or haters will bring up a lot of times, is the sales numbers specifically for Soul Calibur 6, and why it was poor and didn't justify a sequel. But we're going to get into how that's actually calculated and try to pin down exactly what the closest unit number that we can find based on digital sales and based on the trends and stuff like that. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is, obviously, as of July 2021, Bandai Namco came out and they tweeted that it sold over 2 million copies. It actually doesn't say 2 million, it says over 2 million. I'll show you on the screen right here. And this is the number that's been tossed around and VGC has reported since like that time, and like there's been no other attempts to try and recalculate that or readjust for any new unit shipped and anything of that nature. Now remember, that 2 million figure is not counting digital sales or PC. I've had some people in my comment section say like, oh, well, Steam, the highest it only had was like a couple, like whatever. Steam doesn't give its numbers for sales either. So if, I guess you want to try to make a loose determination, you can guess by the maximum concurrent numbers and you can say that that is the purchase across the world. But that's not even really a good marker, because games go on sale a lot on Steam and people tend to add stuff to their library and never ever get around to playing it. So that number is actually much higher than even that could be calculated. Now, the big trend in the industry now has been that like most games are bought digitally. It's different for the different companies. I think Nintendo still has the highest percentage of physical or boxed games that they actually sell compared to digital. Xbox is the greatest. I believe it's like 92% or something of Xbox purchases are done digitally through their marketplace instead of physically as in stores. So those numbers can really be inflated. Sony's somewhere in the middle. The latest, I think, number that I saw was 72% for Sony, but that could be a little bit under or lower. So what we're going to do is some quick math, and we're just going to take a crack at how many digital units we can guesstimate are sold. And I'm going to underlay this so that like it actually is a much bigger number than this. But if I show on screen, I'm going to tell you right now, if we know for a fact that it sold 2 million units as of last reporting, and we know that that number is, we'll just be generous and say 60% was digital purchases, even though it's closer to like 72%. So we have these numbers going back to like 2018, which we'll talk to in a minute. But if we take this number and we punch it into a calculator and you just find out literally what the percentage is, that would be 60% versus 40%, and the 40%, the 2 million would be of 5 million. So if we can underestimate that the digital sales alone were 60% of the sales for Soul Calibur, which is a much lower estimate than we're working with, then that would make it around 3 million units were actually purchased digitally versus the 2 million units that were purchased and the number was told about. So like Xbox and Sony don't really tell their digital numbers. They don't really go out of their way to say anything like that unless it's like otherwise specified, but most of the time they don't report that. That's why the VGC doesn't include digital sales when it's talking about their pricing or their charts. So the video game charts will never ever talk about that. So we can only talk about units shipped, which is what they usually say. So that over 2 million number, the over implies digital as well, that Bandai Namco probably didn't even release, or maybe they didn't get all the information from the stores, or maybe they're not actually talking about that. But that's pretty normal and par for the course. So if we're looking at that actual number being closer to 5 million than 2 million, that becomes a completely different ball game, because that's almost Tekken numbers we're talking about, not Tekken the last one, obviously, because that was out since like 2015, so it had plenty of time to build up sales. But for the other Tekkens before that, we usually see somewhere between like 4 and like 9 million or something like that. So it's similar to that, and it definitely would make this the highest selling Soul Calibur game of all time, because I think the number one that was top before that was Soul Calibur 2, and across all the platforms that it was on, that was actually 2.5 million. So the number is actually a lot higher, but how are we going to get to this number? Like, what are we talking about? If we want to look at this article that I brought up, and I'm going to show some screenshots where I'll talk about it right here. We literally have, this is for 2022. The reported games were 94.2% were digital and 5.8% were boxed. This is obviously like based on, that's the PC numbers, but if we want to look at the console market, it says 72% were purchased digitally and 28% were purchased from physical, for boxed. So we can take that number and extrapolate that back to what we were talking about before when we're coming up with the numbers for Soul Calibur. And I will show you the full list here. There's a lot to go over there. And then I also have this chart here that I want to talk about. It shows video game sales versus for that time period versus new versus digital. And we have from 2018 to 2021, and you can see the large disparity of digital versus physical purchases. So that means if we're going to go to 2018 and we see that low number of physical, Soul Calibur, the unit shipped is included in that, and the bright green bar next to it represents the potential of how much it would have sold digitally. So there's a lot to go over there, and I can understand why some people tend to not really judge that too well, or they'll take like whatever somebody else says, like me, with like a grain of salt when it comes to sales numbers, because I've been throwing around the 3 to 4 million mark for Soul Calibur total sales, when it's actually probably closer to 5 million. You can do the math yourself and look it up. Hopefully like this helps explain things a little bit better. Now, people use data for different purposes. Most people will take a data point and they'll use it to support an argument that they're actually making. So if somebody wants to say Soul Calibur 6 sucked and didn't sell well, they're going to utilize that 2 million number. But if somebody actually wants to talk about how well the game performed, you can actually talk about the numbers of the digital and stuff, and you have to do a little bit of digging because it's all approximations, because they're, like I said, the digital numbers were not released. So hopefully like that actually helps a little bit when it comes to some understanding, or helps people to try and have a better idea of how well the game actually sold. Because I don't know if you remember, but there was a Motor Hero Okubo uploaded it on Twitter like way back in the day, something like this was an application game, and then he said that Bandai Namco gave them a number, a marker to reach, and it had to reach at least 1 million units shipped in order to continue the series. And when he finished, and when Soul Calibur 6 was finished, when it was done, not canceled, the game just finished, he actually wrote, he had a little thing that came up that said Finn, and a lot of people took that, I think including some people like Maximilian Dude and stuff, as that Soul Calibur as a series is done, but it literally just meant that Soul Calibur 6 is done, and it subsequently meant Motor Hero Okubo's time at Bandai Namco was also coming to an end, because he did go on to work on Pac-Man 99 for a little bit, and then he actually got a job as a CEO of another games company in California, so, and that's where he's technically residing now today. The game did much better than people want to give it credit for, and I can see how it would look small when you're talking about games with like numbers like Tekken numbers, where we're talking about like 8 million or 10 million units shipped, and we're talking about like Mortal Kombat and stuff. Like, yeah, it does look puny compared to them, but it does fairly well, I think, compared to some of the other fighting games out there. Like I always bring up like Under Night and Birth, Blaze Blue, Guilty Gear, Samurai Showdown, Virtual Fighter, even Dead or Alive. Like it does better numbers than most of those games. So we should be actually up here to contend it with the big dogs. And the fact that it, at very minimum, made the same amount of sales that like Soul Calibur usually does, and at the maximum over-exceeded and overshot that with the digital sales combined, because the only games that would have been able to be purchased digitally would have been Soul Calibur 4, Soul Calibur 5, and Soul Calibur 6, because those are the only times that they were offering digital marketplaces at the time for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 and PC, obviously. So, with that being said, there's like a lot more to go over when it comes to that. So I'm sure anyone has questions or something like that, feel free to drop it in the comment section down below, and I'll try to get to it as quickly as I can, or hop onto the Discord and ask me there. It's up to you. But I do want to go over last week's poll before we end the video. And in the poll, I actually said, I disagree with Triple KO's podcast comments. However, do you think we will get a Soul Calibur 7? 36% of people voted yes, soon. 43% of people voted, which is the highest, said yes, but not for a few years. 16% of people said maybe, and 5% of people said no, I hate fun, which is the funny thing. This is out of a pool of 273 votes, and be sure to go over on the community tab of this of the YouTube video to make sure that you click on today's poll so you can show up with your comments on the next video. And that's going to bring the video to an end right now, guys. But I just want to say thank you for watching, and thank you for becoming members and joining the Yoon-Fam and all that stuff. And as I always say, guys, I love it. Thank you.
And thank you.